Howdy everyone, dankydrank here, and today we are going to be learning how to write methods in Java, which if you don't know what that means yet, you will in the next few minutes or so, probably like 10 to 15 minutes, maybe more, maybe less, we'll see. Guys, I'll be back in a minute. Alrighty, so we are back, and I am going to show you how to write methods, but first I need to tell you what all this means. I might have explained this in the last video, I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but I mentioned probably that this is called a class file. Files in Java are called class files, so this file that we created in the last video, which you haven't seen, if you haven't seen, it's in the playlist with this video. I also, just so you guys know, I'm using a different screen recorder, so everything should be a lot more fluid right now. We'll see. So a file in Java that stores code is a class file. We have one here, which we created in the last video, named testing. And when you compile that testing file, you'll notice that it creates a class file, and this is just a backup of your Java file. This class file is actually what the compiler looks at. This is what we edit. It's just how it works. But right now we have our class file, but we're actually editing the .java file. And we want to do something in it. So what do we want to do? Well, in order to write any code, in order to do anything in Java, you need what is called a method. Now, what is a method per se? Well, let's go over the Java chain of containment, I'm going to call this. Alright, so let me explain. I think I might have explained this. No, I haven't. Basically, if I were to type anything in here and hit compile, there would be an error. However, if I type in // and then anything and hit compile, the compiler just totally ignores anything that's on the line with these two slashes. So it'll skip over this part, which means it won't error, and it's just for people who are reading your code to understand what things are, like markers for yourself. And it's not interpreted by the computer in any way, shape, or form. And say I wanted to write like a whole paragraph in here, you wouldn't want it to be for every line doing slashes, because see, if I type in here, it's not commented out, this is called a comment, whereas here it is. So what you can do is if you want to comment out large sections of code, you do /**, and you just go down and type whatever you want, and then when you're done, do */*. And anything that's typed in here will be commented out. Again, it's called a comment, because it's only for us, and it's basically like annotating your code. Anything not in there will be recognized by the compiler. So, I'm going to call this the Java chain of containment. Don't use this, because this isn't, or don't actually say this because you might sound kind of silly. This is just a way for me to better explain this. So, first, we have, I'm going to go back up a little bit here. We have methods, or classes, class files. And there's actually something, I'm going to explain what this is. Packages are just groups of class files, but you won't need to learn anything about them right now. So don't even worry about that right now. We'll get into that way later down the line, because it's not really useful until you get into more complicated programming. So right now you're just in a default package, which means you didn't have to do anything special. So now let's see what's next. Next is class files. So what we're currently typing in is in a class file. And then third is a method. Now, you don't know what methods are, but that's what I'm here to explain today. So what are methods? Well, let me go ahead and end this comment here. Methods are groups of code that can be called, which basically means executed, with a single command. So now that we have this may make sense, a little bit more sense. It may not, but once we start writing methods, you'll get into the hang of it. But say you have a big, huge program that you wrote, and you need to do things, right? So anytime you want to do anything in Java, all the code you're going to write that does stuff, that not necessarily creating things, but any code that does stuff, that actually modifies things, that modifies memory, that for the most part just does important things that'll actually change your program and its state. Take all the lines of code that you're going to write that do those important things are going to be inside methods. And so, let me show you what a method looks like, and hopefully just by seeing it, you'll get the hang of it a little bit more and get what I mean. So follow after me, and I'll explain what it means when I'm done. This will pretty much be the trend for this course. So just follow after me, type in public, static, void, and we're going to type in hello world with the lowercase h at the beginning, two parentheses with nothing in between them, hit return, open bracket, close bracket, there you go. Now, what does this mean? Well, if you guys remember from earlier when I said public meant that other class files could look inside this class file. And I'll show you how to do that later. Actually, probably in this video. The other class files could look in here and see what's inside and do stuff based on it or with it. Or call methods in this file. Now, when I'm calling a method, or what are you doing when you're calling methods? When you call a method, you are running all the code inside the method. And the reason I'm documenting everything so thoroughly here is because at every video from this point on, I'm going to put this file on paste bin and provide a link to it in the description so you guys can see it. Just helps you out when you're beginning to program. So when you're calling a method, you're running all the code inside this method. So right now, if I were to call this hello world method, this is a method. For the time being, it doesn't do anything. So public means that other classes can look in this class, see this particular group of code called a method, and call it. Now, static. What does that mean? Well, later on down the line, you won't really get this right now. I'm going to try and explain it as best I can, and I'll explain it really well later. Basically, static means that it's actually, the method is associated with the file. Later down the line, you may have these things called objects, and objects are new instances of the file, in which from one file to another, they can have different things stored inside them, but they all have the same framework with the same methods, but different variables inside them that store different things. Variables will be in the next lesson. So they all have different variables inside them that can store different things. Static means that there can only be one value for each variable in this class because it belongs to the file as opposed to a specific instance of the class. They're called instances. For those of you who are techies out there, which you probably should be a techie if you're learning how to program. But now we have void, and void basically means that when you call this hello world method, it doesn't have a value when it's done. And that'll make more sense later, but I'll explain it at the end of this video, just so you guys can see what I mean. Hello world is the method name, because everything needs an identifier or a name. And when you're naming a class file, you always want to start with a capital letter at the beginning. And when you're naming a method, you always want to start with a lowercase letter. And for every word that you put on, put on at the end, if it needs to be a continuous string of text, you make the first letter of that word capital. The reason we do the lowercase letter at the beginning of methods as opposed to capital for classes is that you need to be able to distinguish them easily. And I'll show you why later down the line when we do objects, which is really what Java is all about, is objects. But you don't know anything about them yet. You will in thorough detail later. So these two right here, these parentheses, don't really mean anything to us right now, but later down the line, again, you're going to need them. If you really want to learn what they mean, go ahead and search on Google for parameters right now, but I'm going to have a video about that in the future, so you guys should stick around and see that. Probably won't be too long from now. We'll see. I'm going to teach you guys how to loop through code, variables, and if statements before I do anything with parameters. So that's all for what I have to say about that. So it'll probably be around episode 5 or 6, somewhere around there. So, yeah, probably 5 or 6. So, in this hello world method, we are going to write, follow me, system.out.println, start parenthesis, start quotation, hello world, and then end quotation, end parenthesis, semicolon. Now, this is a method call. So, I told you about calling a method earlier. This is a method call. How do you call a method, first of all? To call a method, you type file name dot method name, and for now we're going to use 2 empty parentheses, especially unless you're in this case here, and I'll explain why that is later. But for any of the methods you create, in order to call them, you're going to do file name dot method name. So here, system is actually a file name. Out is something that you don't need to know yet. That'll be way down the line. And println is a method, very similar to this one. However, this hello world right here just means that it's taking in a value and printing that out. And the reason why we have these 2 empty parentheses here is because our methods right now aren't going to be taking anything in until we get to parameters. So, right now, if we hit compile at the top, go down to interactions and type in testing.hello world with 2 parentheses and a semicolon. Oh yeah, let me explain the semicolon. It's important. Semicolon, whenever you have a statement in Java, this is a statement. A statement is basically a line where you are not specifying a condition. So this has no condition. It's going to run no matter what if this method is called. And you are not declaring a method or a class file. So this right here is a method declaration, along with these 2 curly braces. And what's inside of it is the actual method itself that gets run. But the whole thing is a group as a method. This is just the code that gets run. This right here is just saying that it is a method. So semicolon goes at the end of anything where you aren't checking for a condition and you aren't declaring a new method or class file. So if I hit enter here, that just symbolizes that it's the end of that particular statement, because I could write, in theory here, I could write a whole bunch of things on the same line, like that, and compile it and call testing.hello-world again, and it would do both. But that's ugly, so don't do that, because it's horrible. So, you notice that actually printed stuff out right there. That's cool. You guys just made the computer print something out for you. So, that is one method. And say I want to create another method. I'm going to remove this and aliens line for now. And I can write public static void and aliens. You see the naming trend here, lowercase letter at the beginning of a method, and uppercase letter for every word after that. 2 empty parentheses, which you need for now, and all the methods you're going to be writing are going to look like this. The only thing that you are going to be able to change right now with the knowledge you have is the method name. But later down the line, everything in this declaration will be able to change. This can be changed, this can be removed, this can be changed, this of course can be changed, and what's in here can be changed. So, what's right in here, system.out.println and aliens. There we go. And now if we compile this and we just run hello world, you see that this right here, this method has no effect on this method, and neither does this on this. They don't interact with each other at all right now. The only thing about them is that they're in the same class file. But if I were to do say testing dot and aliens. If I were to call that, just like I said here, to call a method, compile, run. Oops, I can't do that. Sorry. Getting ahead of myself here. If I were to call hello world now, and this is what I love about Dr. Java, is it has this little pane down here. It'll call both methods. So it calls this one first, and it says, okay, we're going to print out hello world. And it says, oh, we want to call this method here. So it says, okay, we're in this method. We're going to call system.out.println, and it's going to print out and aliens, and be like, okay, go back into hello world. Is there anything else left to do? No. There you go. So that is how you can call methods. And if the methods are in the same class file as the one you're working in, you can just remove the class file name altogether and just go ahead and run it like you did last time by typing testing.helloworld, parenthesis, semicolon, because this thing right here isn't in the same class as all this. So if I run that right there, you see it still works, even though it only works with this. You can only remove the file name if you're in the same file. Now, there are two more things I want to go over. Three. Sorry. This should be fast. Public, follow after me. Public, static, void, main, string, bracket, bracket, args. Start bracket, close bracket. Alright, so what are we doing here? Well, this right here is a method. Very similar to these other ones. And if we were to do something with this method, say, like, put anything in here. So we'll call hello world in here. We don't need the file name because it's in the same file. Now if I hit compile, and now if I hit run up at the top, it calls this method instantly. And then it calls hello world and goes, okay, prints out hello world. Then that calls and aliens, which prints out and aliens. We're back in hello world. There's nothing left. Now we're back in the main method. There's nothing left. So we're done. And now, that's all you need to know about this for now. It has to be typed exactly like this for this to work. I'll explain why later. It's one of those just weird Java syntax things. Syntax means the way it's written, or like just how you're supposed to write it for coding purposes. There are two more things here. So we're going to hit return a couple times, create a new method. Actually, no, you aren't going to do this. I'm doing this for demonstration. I said I'd explain what void means, and I'm about to. So I'm going to type this out really quick, and then I'm going to explain what it does. You can probably guess what it means, or what it does just by that, but we'll see. Okay. So what this does is, I told you before that void means that it doesn't return a value, or it doesn't. When I call this random number method, this isn't actually equivalent to any value. This is. So if I were to say system.out.println, say what's going here, system.out.println, random number. So I'm calling this method inside the parentheses of this other method, and I hit run now. You see it'll create a random number, and that'll change from time to time. Let me expand this up a little bit. There we go. So you can see that this changes every time I run it. And basically, every time I call this method, this return just means that this method, for a short period of time, whenever it was called, is going to equal a random number. And this is how you generate a random number in Java. You don't need to learn that right now. That'll be later. And that is almost all I need to explain right now. But int just basically is an integer. This means that this random number method has an integer value. But I'll go into that in more depth when we get to variables. We are almost out of time, guys. This is becoming a very long video at 20 minutes. I'm going to stop very shortly, create a new class. What do they call this? Public class testing2. Actually, we're going to call this second with a capital S. And go ahead and create a method body by or a class body by putting the curly braces, save it to the same file. And, okay, that's because I got rid of the method. Now in this, we can type in a new method called public static void and Mars. And we're gonna go ahead and print out and Mars in here. So now if we compile this, this isn't gonna do anything. But in this method here, say at the end of and aliens, or even right here, I can do second, because that's the class name, dot, and Mars. And I hit compile. I hit run, and it's going to print out hello world, of course, because we have hello world there, and aliens, because it calls this method, and then and Mars, because it calls this method. That's how you use multiple classes. And guys, that is it for now. I hope you have a lovely day. Variables are going to be the next video. I'm really enjoying this series. I'm going to keep on making them, even if this gets a horrible response, because I love teaching people Java. My goal of this right now is just to make a very thorough, in-depth tutorial that actually allows people to understand things instead of just typing random code that some person tells them to type without explaining it. So I'm going to try and explain everything, and guys, some of the videos are going to be a little bit longer, but that's just a side effect of total knowledge. So guys, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please follow me on Twitter for updates about videos when they're coming out. If you have any questions, you can tweet me or leave them in the comments section below. Probably Twitter's a little bit better. I'll get back to you a little bit faster that way, most likely, because it goes right to my phone. Guys, have a lovely day. My Twitter link is in the description. So is the paste bin of this main testing class. I don't have this. I won't put the second one in, but this main testing class is going to be on Pastebin. The link is in the description. Have a lovely day. Sorry about this long outro thing. Goodbye.